Okay, welcome. This is part 4, Marvel Snap meets Clash Royale. We're using Fusion and Unity. So I'm a little bummed because I recorded this 40-minute video. It took 40 minutes, and it was the good thing about that one is that I caught a bug as I was recording, and we fixed it live, and then I had that on a recording. But then when I went to edit the video, there was no sound, and so I had to scrap that. And I'm not good enough to edit and to do voiceover or anything to show you the clip, but I'll still share with you what I did. So let me show you where we're at. Now we can do the display name, and I can show you that in a bit. It's not saved anywhere. It's just temporary. So this is the first player, and we're gonna do this one as the second client. And at this point, eventually I'll have a black screen saying loading or waiting for player. So that way you know you're waiting for another player to come in. And yeah, so and then it'll fill this stuff. So this is GG and my opponent is client. This is the master player. As you notice, now these fields spawn by themselves. So they're modular pieces now as a prefab. In the next video, what I'll do is I'll change these and I'll add modifications so that they are different, so you can tell which one is which. All the images will face the player now, and it will look just like this, right? All the UI is facing the camera, so there's no weird thing going on. And I'll show you how I did that, because that's something very important in a network game. How to adjust so that because the rotation has to be different, even though you're syncing everything else. So I'll go over that. Now the thing that I caught before the bug, it was adding these values in here. Because now, just like in this picture, you have, and I need to make the numbers bigger and the images bigger, but the image, the number, right, of the power of the cards should add up in here. So that works now. So you see a 4 here, there's a 4 here. As you notice that this guy's on the left and it's on the right up here, is because these players are flipped, right? Like one player's on the other side. And so my left is his right, if that makes sense. So this is accurate. It's just when you're testing, you're like, no, I want it to be the other way, both on the left. Well, yeah, you're crazy. Like that's not gonna happen. I mean, you could try. I just, again, game dev is hard enough. I just try to make my life easier. So I just flipped the card for the second player. See, like this is flipped. So he's on the other side, but because it's the camera that's flipped, it all looks the same way. So, and the cool thing is that you look, the card is facing the right way. And if I look at this, it's facing the right way. So if I add one here, the 4-1, and in here, 1-4, right? Like, or 4-1, 1-4. So it's working. Like this is super cool. So it won't let me put it on their field. I'll show you where I do that now. And then it uses the energy, and it's in here. So I can show you a runtime how I can't use that. I can use that one, and so I gotta wait. I can use that 4. So I'll wait till 4. Use that. Can't do it here. So I went in and basically no ChatGPT this time. I cleaned everything up and I did what I had to do to fix whatever ChatGPT did or whatever I needed to add logic. So I added the field script, that's a network field, and I added the connections to say, okay, this is what the field needs, and we'll go over that. So that's what this is about, is how to get to this point where it's starting to feel like a game. The next video, we're going to add the winning condition, and we can start playing games and winning. And I don't know if to start over. I got to figure that out too. But a winning condition, and these fields will have timers. Again, the end goal is to have this timer thing per field, and these will spawn. So I'll show you where we're at. Things are coming together, which is really cool. So I'll show you where the first thing is, what did I add? Because as I thought, okay, my goal is this. I need to have the cards spawned. They have to be networked. So we have here, if I type P, there's the card. Maybe I'll type card. We have this network card and we have this regular card. The regular card is the one in the hand. The network card is the one that spawned into the field. Okay, and that's how I decided to handle it. If you're showing hands to the other player, regardless of it's like if you can see it or not, you might do the network the whole time. But that's where I decided to do that. So let's go over the field. So we have the field locations, left, middle, right. And again, because in the last video I mentioned why I made the decision is that if I had a script that changed these to have like 4 fields, we could do that. The only problem is that the art suffers because they have to resize things, and it's like a pain to figure out the resize of the cards, the resize of the locations, and the size of the field and the board, and it's just a mess. And again, it's not worth in my opinion, it's not worth it, because it's probably worth, let's say, $1,000, because it would take it'll take a few hours to do, but the headache of like testing it and making sure it works, and then like, oh, it's just like, yeah, all the resizing nightmare. But it'll probably like debugging it will be worse, and you have all these crappy art again. You don't want dev art. Just, like, size things the way they're supposed to be to look nice, and then you're done. Like, yeah. So having to have all the specific parameters and making sure like that it works just for an extra field, just like add it manually. Okay, so we have the field layout. Eventually, what we'll have for the field layout prefab is we'll have an array of prefabs, and it will pick a random field to spawn. We'll do that in the next video. But let me show you. And here, this is what kind of spiral everything to be the way it is now. But what I started with is I first said, okay, I need to spawn the network prefab. Okay, and I need a zone. And then I changed the zones to accept that and spawn. And then I was like, okay, I need the field to figure out the rest of it. So the field, this network field is like the key component. Okay, now how is everything going to pivot? Because the field is like the mediator between the game, what's going on, and all the network pieces, and the hand, because the field prefab, just before we get into it, will have the zones, the player 1 and player 2, which are local. They're not networked, even though the whole thing is networked. And this is like a warning. It's like a beware type of thing, because when you have a network object, it propagates to all the children. But my hypothesis, and I think it's working correctly, is that this is not a network thing. So as long as this doesn't have network behavior, I can treat it like a regular mono behavior. But I have to be aware of what's going on. Right? Nothing in this will sync to the other side, and I don't want it to. All I'm doing, this is the second player's zone. This is the first player. Again, because it's not being rotated or anything, only the camera is being rotated. So the player 1 will see this, and player 2. And you saw how when I drag and drop, it wouldn't let me do the other zone. And so everything's working out right. I tested it, and so I know this works. But you have to be aware, be very careful, because you can get into dangerous ground by just like calling things because this is in the same place. So I have to be, and I'll show you. So let's start with the zone. Okay, the zone is super simple, but this is like the glue between the two, because the place card on the zone is called by this non-network thing. Okay, so we have allow to play in zone. So this is from the local player. So in here we'll try back and back. So the card, I'm holding the card, I'm dragging it. I release the mouse. We have this from before. And in here, we say, okay, we have the local player controls. Am I allowed? If I'm allowed, just if I'm not allowed. Okay, so I did it. I changed it to be not allowed because I didn't care what happened after. So what the other thing we did that was like because of testing, and because when you're testing, you're like, okay, why is this not working? And one of the things was the raycast. And what would happen is this card was selected, but it had a raycast. And because of that, when I detected the raycast, it would detect this card. So what I did is when you're dragging this, I disabled the collider because I already have it. I own this. I selected it. I'm going to drag it. I'm going to update its position all the time. I don't need the raycast anymore. I'm not using it. And so I let go of it. And in here, what I need to do to make sure this works is do a return. Because what happens is if I'm, oh no, if not allowed to play in the position, if I'm not allowed, it's going to go back to the center. Okay. And so when it does that, I need to allow it. So it doesn't matter. So the main thing with this, it doesn't matter. It'll enable it when it goes back. So I need to not return. If I did a return, I would have to add it here because it doesn't really matter for the next guy. So if I go like this, it doesn't matter. Because the client, if it is allowed to put it in, it'll destroy it. So I don't need to find. The main thing with this is that the reason why this works is because the raycast happens here. In this function, there's a raycast to check for the zone, okay? And that's what I need. And so this fixes that bug. Okay? And I'm going to talk about that. Let's go into that now. Because what happens in here, it does a hit scan, and I grab the first thing it hits. And this is dangerous to do. And so what I would do if this was my full-time job or part-time and I'm in charge of this, I would do a hit scan on everything and then grab all those, because that way I'm not just detecting the top one, I'm just detecting everything that goes through for the next 20 or so, whatever. And then I say, okay, go through them and grab the zone. And if there's no zone, don't do anything, right? So that's what this does. If there's no zone, do not hit any colliders. But if so, that's one thing, and then I wouldn't have to fix that. So that's the problem, is that if you leave it like this, you are going to have to check to make sure nothing gets in the way of that raycast because it can cause trouble. Okay? So that's something to fix eventually. Maybe I'll do it, maybe I won't. We'll see. Again, that's just me. I'm not getting paid to do this. I'm trading art, and it's not going to be a finished product. But if it is, I would fix that. Get component, place card. And so now we're like, okay, this is something that ChatGPT didn't do. So in here, and if you notice the previous videos and you've been following, hopefully you're not copying the code. Like, don't copy the code right now. Like, wait till I'm done. Right now, I'm trying to show you how to start and how to go, like the process. Because regardless of what you do, you're not going to do the exact same thing I'm. But you need to understand the core principles on how to make games. Because I'm just showing you how I'm doing, how I would do this if I was at work, one way or another. Um, I'm not going through the whole thing, making it, and then building a tutorial with a course on it for you. What I'm doing is I'm showing you what it looks like day to day as a developer working. Okay, so if you're working, you don't know the end, right? Like you're just kind of like building the Legos, and then if you need to go back, you can fix it as you go. And that's what I'm trying to show you is that process and how I'm thinking and how I'm going through fixing this stuff and debugging it. Okay, so in the previous video, ChatGPT gave me, and I guess I could pull it up, but I don't want to take up your time. So in here, I used to have an array of colliders, right? The zones. But now we have this thing that we spawn, right? So these colliders are not there. And I don't want to go through the pain of like adding them at runtime when it spawns. Oh, store this array or this collider in the array. We don't need that. All we do, so that I asked ChatGPT, I need a hit scan, a 2D hit scan to grab the zone. And it did, but it didn't remove the array. It was so dumb. Like, and I didn't check it until I started doing more like debugging, and I realized it's like I started cleaning up the code, and I went up here and deleted or commented out the array of colliders because like I don't need that anymore. I don't need that reference. I'm gonna spawn it at runtime. And then all of a sudden errors started popping up here, and I'm like, what? And the code still had the array in there, and so I had to take that out because we don't need it and add this check, right? I say, okay, is the thing that we hit a zone? If it is, and it's not, no, then we're gonna do a check. Can we place this card in the zone? If we can, okay. So this is a network thing. This is gonna start the chain of network events. But in here, we have all the local variables that we want to change, right? Because okay, we're gonna stop all coroutines. This was an error that popped up because I'm scaling the card in here. When I'm like hovering over cards, I'm scaling it. And usually when you click the card, it gets bigger. I could do a thing where it just like stops doing the scaling. once I drag it. That's an option. But for now, all I do is the moment you let go, I just stop coroutines. Because if it's gonna place the card, it's gonna delete the local one, right? Because in the hand, you're dragging it from your hand, the local version, and it's gonna spawn a network version of the same card. So I know I'm gonna delete this. So in order to stop, I stop all the coroutines so that it doesn't give me an error here. I add the card to the bottom. Again, this can be commented out once we have a proper way of getting rid of cards or whatever the game mechanic is. You run out of cards in your hand, kind of like Pokemon TCG, the new one. You just have 20 cards, and when you draw, like you don't lose when you get to the end. You just don't draw anymore. You just play with the cards you have. Spending favor. Okay, so then in here, this one is an iffy. I can, because this is a network thing, and I'm just spending the card favor. This, you could argue that it goes in this function where the network stuff happens. It's just that this was already done. Like we tested it with the button, and so it was working. So I just left it there. It's up to you. Like if you don't like it there, just do it wherever you want. Remove the card from hand and draw a new one. So this one, like I said, this is all local. I'm drawing a new card. I don't need to check with the other player. But if you wanted to like double check and make sure they could draw, you can do a server check here. And then it returns true, remember, because we're wanting to know if in here, right? Because if we are not allowed to play in the zone for like, we don't have favor, we don't have this or that, it should go back to the hand. Okay, so that's the whole point of that. Okay, that handles the drag and drop because the drag and drop is responsible for where the card goes. And so that way we don't have to pass responsibility to another class. And then in here we handle all the local stuff and go deeper. I know this can get confusing, so I'm trying to go in order so you understand the logic behind it. We're hitting the zone, and the zone is the glue. Remember, it's going to connect the hit scan and everything, so I don't have to worry about like, okay, all that stuff is happening local, but the zone now needs to handle all the proper, like start is the domino for the network stuff. That makes sense. So in here, okay, we're going to start the chain of events that will lead to a network card now. This is all the checks to make sure, like, can we put it in this zone? Are we the first player? And this is something I want to make sure it's clear for you guys. The way I check if you're the first or second player is this: if you have a state authority. If you get here first, every if you're doing 2-player game, that's how I do. Like it's just that. There's no like one will get there first before the other. That's a guarantee. And so there'll always be someone that has state authority. I'm not doing any checks to like for who comes back from the game. And so when the game spawn, okay, this guy has authority return, and this one doesn't. I flip the camera. So now player 2 will always be the person with a flipped camera. And so I use the same mechanic for everything that needs to be on the second player. So the other thing is that the first player will spawn everything networked. And so the first player needs to know, hey, am I handling my own cards or the cards of the other player? If I'm handling the other players, then, what's the logic? So the first thing is the camera. The next thing, like you saw in here, the zones. We're in the zone. Where's the zone? So we check, do I have a state authority? That means I'm the first player. If this is not a first player zone, then return false. We can't play it. And then this is vice versa, like the other flipped. If it doesn't have state authority, I'm player 2. If I'm player 2, I need to check, is this the first zone or not? Then, like, do we have enough cards? These are just checks. If it gets through all these, then we're going to spawn something and it's going to return true. And here's the logic, right? Like we have the slot, the position, and now we're going to spawn. Okay, so we have all the criterias, spawn the network. And this is, again, a single player behavior. So the first player and the second player will be doing this on their own computer. And this is something that's like not mentioned. When I look at a lot of the Fusion tutorials, they're very like, they just talk as if everyone knows how to do stuff. And I'm like, it goes over my head. Even though I'm a computer science major, I still like, maybe you might say, oh, this guy sucks. I don't know what he did to get the degree. But I just get things done. And sometimes the tutorials don't work for me. Like I see those Fusion tutorials and I'm like, dude, like why didn't you like talk normal? And so that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to talk you through the logic and what actually happens so that in your brain you can like, okay, this is what happens when I do this. Um, Sorry if I move my hands. It's just the way I talk. So maybe I should make the video bigger if you want. You can see my hand. I don't know. I'll stop. Okay, so we're spawning the card. We need to have this position and the boolean if it's in the player. So we're giving these stuff because I'm going to show you why. Because this kind of continually changed. So I did not know ahead of time that I needed these variables. I just, as I went along, I was like, you can think about it's like, do I need these to pass these along? Yes or no. Usually, if you can get away without passing variables, or like maybe one struct where it has all the variables, right? Like, so if you have a class that has all the variables inside packed and you can transfer that and then unpack it when you get there, you can do that. But I was just doing things as I went, right? So I was like, oh, I need the card ID because that's the thing that I'm gonna use as I spawn instead of passing all these variables. That's the only thing I need. Then I added, oh, well, I need to know if this card is the first player because this is how I know, because I'm telling the first player, okay, this card is yours or this card is your opponent. And the first player will spawn all the cards and they'll flip the image depending on where they are. And okay, and then the location. Now, I want to explain something very crucial. So I'm going to put a chapter marker here because I'm going to explain something that is not really explained and I have no idea why it works this way. But Fusion 2 is different than Fusion 1 in some ways, and this is one of them. And so I want to explain it very clear if I can. I don't know why. I'm not going to pretend to know everything. I just know the behavior. Okay, I'm going to show it to you. When you spawn a network object, it does, even though I tell it the position, this position of spawn will not happen on the client, on the other person. If I just rely on this like that, it will spawn at 0, 0 for the client. Why? I have no idea. Like, so, okay. And the reason why I'm telling you this is because, again, for this, like, for this one, the way I do it is I just do this network transform. Okay. So the network transform, it fixes that. The network transform, the only problem is that it does both position and rotation at the same time. There's no check in here to undo the rotation. I think the reason why is because they do some optimization because they assume 99% of the time when you need to network a position, you also need to network the rotation. And so they just do that and then they have the scale check if you want to, because scale is less frequent. But because again, we are like this doesn't require rotation. In the field, only the image gets rotated. That's what I do. So I don't need to network that. I just check and I rotate it once. But the network card that I have, it does need to rotate the whole thing. And so I could do like a prefab layer and add the card below and have that be rotated manually, like the field effect. That's a way to do it. But the problem with this is like, at least the setup that it's right now, is that when it spawns it, if I have a network transform, the rotation is constantly updating. So if I tweak it, it'll go back. And so it's not what I want. I need the second player to see the card, and so the card needs to be rotated to face the player. So in order to do that, I have to not sync it, not use the network transfer. And that's why you see in the code that I'm passing this position and saving it here. Okay. And that's why I'm saving this, because I need to check. The first player will always spawn all the cards. So I can't check for it has state authority, or I could, but this is specifically for something. So I'll show you. So I set up the card. The other cool thing is that you might not use a lot, but it's good to know is, okay, so there's the spiel about transforms. I'm gonna now do another mark, a chapter mark in here to set up the card. So this is another tool in Fusion, is that you can use what is called OnBeforeSpawn. So before it, if you wanna have something be available the moment it spawns, this is how you do it. because oftentimes with spawning network things, you are not guaranteed that things will be spawning at this right order. You can't control that because it's crazy. And so just don't try to do that. What you do is you use this function to with runner network object, and then you can grab the object, and it will let you basically pre-warm or like pre-set up. And so you just have to set up this function here, and you can set it up however you want. So what I do is I save these variables. There's probably other ways to do it, but this is how I do it. It works. Again, I'm not like I'm telling you, anyone can do this. Like it's not a matter like I wish I was better at it, but I know enough to make it work. Okay. And that's the name of the game. Get it done. Okay, so update current card ID. So in here I give the ID and if this is first player and spawn location. Okay, so in here we go and say, okay, do we have state authority? I already know that this is only gonna be on the first player, but this is just like a sanity check. Sorry, I keep looking over there. It's just that the screen is right there and I you. Card ID. I save all these variables, and these variables are network, at least the ones that I need. Spawn location, if first player. Let me check that. This one is not. It's just a local one. Yeah, gotta double check. As I go through, I'm not sure on some, but the fact that I now know that all these objects are guaranteed, right? I know that they're here. Okay, so the reason why I have this I gotta beware of this because this will I cannot use this variable on the client. I gotta use this on the on the first player. This is for the first player only because it's not network. Okay, so when you do stuff like this, you have to be very careful. You have to know why you're doing these things. Maybe I should comment this in here so that other people, if someone else saw this, it's like only on use use only on the main on or map. And it is used. See, I see has state authority, and in here, this is only run in what? Okay. So again, we have this update thing. The reason for it is because we need to make sure it's guaranteed. Why? So that in here, regardless of who comes first, who gets first here, a lot of times this happened for me in Monkey Do and not Cactus Jam, but Monkey Do. We spawned in an avatar, and we needed the display name, ID, color, skin color, yeah, all these changes, cosmetics, whatnot. And so usually when you spawn, you're like, oh, well, this if the second player spawns it, the first player probably already filled the values, but that's not the case. Sometimes they're not there. You can't guarantee. This way, you can guarantee that they're there. And so what would happen is we would have all these functions back and forth to make sure that the values were added, and it was a mess. So this is the simplest way to do it. This has all the variables that I need to make this work. If we have if I don't have state authority, so this is the rotation again. If we go back to the rotation, if I don't have state authority, this is the client. I give it that spawn location, and I know it will be there because I set it up before it even spawned. And it's a network object. And because it's a network object, it will be here. So, and I only need to do it once. So instead of having a network transform, I say, this is my position and rotate it 180. I don't need this, but it's a nice safe check in case an artist flips the prefab and adds it, whatever. If it's messed up, it'll just zero it out. It's just a nice check. Okay, so we have everything. We go back to the network field and we give it the power. And this is how we know the field needs to be responsible for making sure, okay, we have the power. This is the first player and this is the second player powers. And at the end of the, when the timer goes down, I'm going to check both and I'm going to say, okay, whoever has the most power, it will get a point. And then I'll talk to the network game manager and award the point. Okay, that I already know how I'm going to do it. I had a bug in the previous recording where I forgot to put this down. Okay, and that made it so that one of them wasn't adding up. And I also had other issues like this thing was right here, and this was getting called in the client as well, but the clients can't access that. Okay, because this is a single function, but because this variable is a network variable, so you don't want to have the client change that. You have to be aware that you can use these scripts as regular functions, but you need to know who's doing what. Because, like you saw, it was kind of like crazy how nested it is, right? Like all these functions are nested within each other, and so I had that's up to you, but you don't need to make it as nested. But in this case, that's how it ended up, and I'm okay with it because I already know I follow the logic and I understand what I'm doing ahead of time. But you got to be aware of what you're doing because that's where the power of knowing how to do multiplayer games is understanding when you want to access things on the client only and when you're going to access things on the network, and the power's on you, like when you want to do that. Oftentimes people do everything network and you don't need to, so you usually what I like to do is if I can get away with it, I'll just do everything single player and then add network things where I need them to be. And that's how this turned up, right? Like I showed you the booleans that I don't need on the network, and that's how you trim down instead of doing everything network. I would do everything local until you have to do it network. Um, and that is everything for the spawning. Um, we have all now. It's just a matter of adding more functionality to the field and adding the winning conditions. And so, if I miss something, it's something that you are not aware or that you have questions about, let me know. If you like this, subscribe. The whole point of this YouTube channel is to help developers finish their games. Like how to either if you want to get a job or make a successful game, I'm trying to show you everything so that you know. And it's not predetermined or pre-scripted. This is live. And so if you like this, subscribe. If you know of friends that need help, let them know. See you on the next video.